organizations, people saying it was a matter of time before Iran reared its head in this conflict. Break it down for us, please.
Sure, you're absolutely right that the entire conflict that we've experienced here and that Israel has been experiencing has been at the direction of Iran. Iran has a network of proxies throughout the Middle East there. It runs the Hezbollah there in Lebanon. It was working with forces within Syria. It was supporting Hamas there in the Gaza Strip, and it has been supporting the activities of the Houthis as far as their actions on controlling shipping throughout this area. And so Iran has been pulling the strings of the puppets throughout this region here, but rarely did it actually take action on its own. We did have a couple of times, though, when they took action. There were two different periods. One with the death of the head of Hezbollah. Iran turned around and launched ballistic missile attacks on Israel directly, and then a second attack by Iran on Israel directly. But now we're at a point where Israel has systematically handled the proxies. Hamas really is now powerless within the Gaza Strip and is unable to join in on this fight. Hezbollah, with the attack, with the pager attack, has taken out so many of the Hezbollah forces there, and then taken out their leader, has made Hezbollah into a powerless group. They're not really able to do anything right now against Israel. Assad is no longer in control of Syria, so Iran no longer has the ability to supply Hezbollah with weapons through Syria like they were before with the fall of Assad. And the Houthis have been being beaten up on because of their attacks on shipping on several different occasions, reached an agreement with the United States not to attack U.S. forces, but it still occasionally launches a ballistic missile towards Israel. And the Houthis really are not able to do much on their own at this point. So Iran now it finds itself directly confronting Israel instead of having to work through its proxies.
Ken, thank you so much for that detailed breakdown, providing that perspective, explaining how we got to this point. So let's fast forward to today. Just hours ago, the commander-in-chief ordering U.S. military strikes on 3 major Iranian nuclear sites. This happening Saturday. And then right now, sirens going off in Tel Aviv, Israel for incoming missiles. We do know that Israel is an ally to the U.S., so if the U.S. does decide to do something, Israel could be retaliated against, but also vice versa, correct? Explain what happened today as President Donald Trump did order these strikes on 3 major Iranian nuclear sites. Throughout this entire conversation, nuclear energy, nuclear weapons has been at the forefront.
Before I get to what happened today, let me back up just a little bit in that we are now into, I think, day 9 of this exchange between Israel and Iran directly. And so Israel had gotten to the point where Iran was enriching nuclear material, enriching uranium with their centrifuges, and was believed to finally be within just a few days of further enrichment to have enough uranium to be able to make 9 nuclear weapons. And Israel finally reached that threshold point where they felt compelled that they had to act now. And so they put in effect the Operation Rising Lion. And with that operation, they started striking against Iran But not only their nuclear weapons capability or nuclear enrichment capability, but also Israel was attacking their ballistic missile production capabilities. The Iran launching these waves of attack against Israel with ballistic missiles. The Israeli air defense system comprised of the Arrow 2, the Arrow, David Sling, and the Iron Dome was able to handle these barrages of ballistic missiles. About 10% were actually getting through that layered defense system. But if Iran were to increase their ballistic missile production, which is what they were attempting to do, this air defense system would not be able to handle an increased number of ballistic missiles coming in. So Israel finally felt that they had to move, and they had to move now. And so 9 days ago, they launched their attack of Operation Rising Lion to strike at both the uranium enrichment facilities and against the ballistic missile production facilities. With the nuclear production facilities, there were about 14 different sites that had to be taken out if you were going to take out their nuclear weapons production capability. And with those 14 different sites, there were 3 sites, or one site really, that absolutely could not be taken out with the Israeli capabilities, and that was Fordow. Fordow nuclear facility was an underground facility about 300 feet below the surface of the ground within a mountain. And Israel did not have the weapons capability. They did not have a platform that they could drop on it that would actually penetrate down that far and be able to destroy that facility. And so to be able to actually take out the entire nuclear weapons development capability of Iran, they needed to have the assistance of the United States, or they were going to have to find some other way to take that out, such as denying Iran the access to that area. The United States has a weapon, the GBU-57 mass ordnance penetrator, which is a weapon that has to be dropped from the B-2. And the United States sent 3 B-2s into the area here to drop ordnance, the GBU-57s, onto the Fordow nuclear facility to take that out. And it's believed that that was successful in taking out Fordow, the Fordow nuclear facility. The other 2 sites that the United States took out tonight was Isfahan and was Natanz. Natanz, like Fordow, had centrifuges and was involved in enriching uranium. And Isfahan was a centrifuge production facility. So they were making the centrifuges that were being used at these other 2 sites to enrich uranium. The other 2 facilities, Isfahan and Natanz, were not taken out by the B-2s. They were taken out by Tomahawk missiles launched from a submarine about 400 miles away. And so Tomahawk missiles came in, took out those 2 sites. The B-2s dropped the GBU-57s onto Fordow, taking that out. And so the United States was able to complete the mission for Operation Rising Lion by allowing Israel to take out all 14 sites.
Well, Ken, as we are discussing nuclear capabilities, I did mention off the top of this interview that the viewers might have some questions for you. We are already getting some in. I want to transition the screen to show you our first question of the hour. It comes out of Arlington from the viewers named. It said, why does Iran want a nuclear weapon? This has been a question that viewers across the country, nationally, internationally, have been wanting to know, Ken.
So if you have a nuclear weapon, then you can use that as an ability to force people to uh, reconsider any type of kinetic attacks on you. That is, look at the exchanges between Israel and Iran. Uh, if Iran had a nuclear weapon at this time, do you think that they would allow Israel to attack them without threatening to use that nuclear weapon on Israel? In fact, Iran has been saying that they were going to destroy Israel. They've been talking about destroying Israel ever since 1979. They've been talking about destroying Israel. Death to Israel, death to America. And so if they had a nuclear weapon, they would almost assuredly use it against Israel. But in addition to the potential of using it against Israel, they also could use it as a defense against any type of activity against them, because they could always threaten to use that nuclear weapon. So, there are only a few countries that are part of the nuclear weapons group. The President Trump has said repeatedly that that Iran should not be allowed to join this community of having nuclear weapons, and so he took action tonight to ensure that they would not be able to do so.
Ken, thank you for answering that question. And following what you just said, this is pretty much a good follow-up question. Riley out of Beaverton is asking early this morning, given the escalating tensions, what are the main strategic or political factors preventing Iran from launching a direct military invasion of Israel? Very interesting question. As we know, right here in the U.S., Congress has not minced words after the commander-in-chief made the decision to strike the Iranian nuclear facilities.
Right. Iran is some distance away from Israel, so they would not be able to do a land invasion against Israel without crossing through a number of different countries. Iran is a fortress country in that they have a mountain range to the west, mountain range to the north, a mountain range to the east. They find themselves sitting there on the Persian Gulf. And so, in reality, while they have an army, they have a military, and also two deserts within Iran also. So they really have to rely upon their Air Force, which they have a limited air capability, their missiles. So they do have both ballistic missiles and drones, and they have a relatively small navy. I think Israel has already taken some action against their naval forces. And so in reality, missiles really are their number one means of fighting. But they also have the IRGC is known for its ability to assist proxies to carry out attacks. So they had relied heavily upon their proxies. But as I went through earlier, most of their proxies are incapable of assisting them at this point. They also have a cyber attack capability. I'm really surprised that we have not seen more from their cyber attack capabilities. They have used it in the past for harassment purposes, but they have been relatively quiet on the cyber front in their actions against either Israel or the United States. That is something we will potentially see here during the coming hours, is a potential attack by cyber. The other thing is IRGC is considered to be the pros as far as terrorism goes. And so the possibility of having asymmetric warfare, of having terrorist attacks against U.S. interests or Israeli interests around the world, such as embassies. The U.S. has a number of military assets staged throughout the Middle East. We have them in Bahrain. We have them in Qatar. We have them elsewhere there in the Middle East. And those forces could be subject to attack there locally. And we've had open borders here in the United States until recently. And IRGC sleeper cells could have been coming into the country. They've always believed, we've thought that they've had IRGC sleeper cells here in the United States. that could be activated at a time of war with the United States. And we will see whether or not they actually activate those sleeper cells and they take action here on the ground. But it doesn't have to be inside the country. It could be against our assets outside the country. So U.S. embassies, American businesses, American tourists, those would all be subject to attack by sleeper cells anywhere in the world instead of right here at home. 9/11, though, when we had similar concerns that we were going to be attacked, everybody in the United States and the intelligence community thought the attack was going to be overseas because that's what we had had in the past. 9/11 showed that that the attack could come here within the country. Same thing now is that IRGC sleeper cells could attack us here in the country here instead of against our resources overseas.
Yeah, well, Ken, speaking of areas that are prone to attack, I want to share this with you. This live feed just now coming in, I did mention that happening right now, sirens in Tel Aviv, Israel are going off for incoming missiles. If you don't mind, Ken, I'm going to pot up the audio so we can listen into what's going on. I am learning this is Central Israel, Tel Aviv, Israel. Israeli police and rescue teams are at this site that they say was just hit in an Iranian missile attack. Let's listen in together. All right, so Ken, we can hear and see a lot of chaos there on the ground as this Iranian missile attack just happened in Tel Aviv. We see Israeli police there, rescue teams, neighboring residents trying to figure out what's going on. This does raise that issue that you just mentioned. Obviously, Israel in close proximity to Iran. If the U.S. does something, Israel will pay. But also, we've seen how conflict with Israel will resort in the U.S. paying. We saw that in real time with those Gaza war protests right here on U.S. college campuses and universities. Many of the viewers wanting to know, does the U.S. need to be on high alert because of these strikes that did happen against Iran from the U.S.? What is your response as a Homeland Security expert and terrorism expert?
Absolutely. So that's my biggest concern, is that of a terrorist attack here in the United States by sleeper cells. And we've been concerned about the fact that sleeper cells supposedly have been here in the United States for years, for decades, and so they may get activated. And with all the traffic across our southwest border into the United States, with us having no knowledge of who these people were coming into the country, it's quite possible that some of the people that came into the country illegally could be members of an IRGC sleeper cell to wait to carry out actions. I'd like to point out that with the activity we see on the screen right now is that the Iranians had been 9 days ago launching waves of missiles that were 50 to 100 missiles at a time, and that only 10% were getting through to the ground. Well, during this attack, there's very few missiles that were launched on this, and that's because Israel has been hitting their ballistic missile launching capabilities. They've been taking out launchers, and while Iran still has plenty of missiles, what they don't have is plenty of ballistic missile launchers, and consequently, they can't launch the barrage that they had at the beginning of this conflict with Israel, because Israel has taken out their launchers. So it's not a matter of how many missiles they have, it's how many ballistic missile launchers they have at this point.
Ken Gray, thank you so much for joining us at a moment's notice for this breaking news. Your perspective and expertise definitely appreciated as we saw the sights and heard the sounds. Also, you eloquently answered those viewer questions. We appreciate you. I know we'll be checking in with you probably later on today and in the coming days. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
And morning, because we know it is 1:27 in the morning. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you.
I'm Jeanne Francine. We are going to step aside for a brief 2-minute commercial break, but don't go anywhere. More breaking news to dissect. We do continue to get your viewer questions in real time. We will get those answered with an expert right after the break.
Just by aerial bombing. Iran is a very powerful country. It has multiple systems in place. Even if top leadership is taken out, there is a second rung waiting in the wings. Harold Road, is that also your appreciation?
Of traction under your leadership.
Getting actually a personal check from Mr. Ratan Tata, we got an opportunity to get listed.
One of the biggest things that has changed in Razorpay over last 5-6 years Jaibi, is to be a single product, single business company to a multi-product, multi-business company.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching Beyond World is One. I'm Jostra Kumar. Let's begin with the headlines. Iran launches 2 waves of missiles at central and northern Israel Air raid sirens rang out in Tel Aviv and explosions rocked Jerusalem and Haifa as missiles impacted at 10 sites. Rescue services says at least 11 people hurt. Israel Airports Authority announces closure of airspace following the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. The land crossings into Egypt and Jordan remain open. Iranian authorities say there is no danger to residents in the city of Qom following the U.S. attacks on nuclear enrichment site in Fordow. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi condemns U.S. attacks, says Tehran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interests, and people.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
President Trump says there will either be peace or tragedy for Iran, warns if Tehran does not make peace, future attacks will be far greater. Hamas condemns a U.S. strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, calling it a dangerous escalation. Group says Trump administration and Israel fully responsible for the grave repercussions of this aggression. Ether plummeted while Bitcoin held steady after President Trump announces U.S. airstrikes on Iran's key nuclear sites. And this marks a sharp escalation in tensions, with markets reacting to the geopolitical shock. And President Donald Trump has claimed that U.S. airstrikes have completely and totally obliterated Iran's main nuclear enrichment facilities and warned of more attacks to come if Tehran does not seek peace. In a televised address from the White House after the U.S. joined Israel's air campaign against Iran, Trump called the U.S. attacks a spectacular military success. Now let's hear into what he said.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Well, that was the U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, to discuss more, we are now being joined by Dr. Avner Cohen, who's a professor of non-proliferation and terrorism studies at the Middlebury Institute. He's joining us on the broadcast from Ontario, California. Thank you so much, Dr. Cohen, for joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you.
And well, let's begin by talking about this whole address by Trump. We now see escalations have now doubled down in the Israel-Iran war. Now, with U.S. direct involvement, Iran has begun its retaliation. First of all, how do you assess this whole weather?
Well, it is clear that the U.S. response was to a degree reluctant. The president has been hesitating for a long, long time. His gut instinct was, for quite a while, not to be dragged into wars in the Middle East. We know his views about previous wars in the Middle East. So that's one thing. According to that, he wanted to leave the impression that what we saw just hours ago, this U.S. attack on the 3 facilities, could be only one action. In other words, one single attack, and he's ready to negotiate. He's ready to move to another phase, to a non-kinetic phase. So a great deal depends on Iran. What we have seen, the Iranian attacks on Israel, is very, very much expected. The real question is to what degree Iran would or would not expand its attack also to the United States. As you know, the U.S. has roughly 40,000 soldiers in and around the Middle East, in Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Israel, elsewhere, and we're all waiting anxiously. We also understand that the Iranian regime instinct is to say we're not surrendering. So it is a great, great challenge to diplomacy, whether it will be third parties who will try to do something. I would have hoped that somehow a third party would have encouraged the sides to have some kind of interim pause in order to reach some basis for discussion. We are not there yet. We are far from there. It's not even clear if there is some discussion in that direction, but the situation right now is very much in uncharted territory.
Absolutely. You mentioned the U.S. was reluctant to actually go and get involved in this. Now, Trump had given a 2 weeks window to Iran where some talks could have been possible, perhaps. On the other hand, UK, France, Germany were also in talks. They had a talk with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. I wonder, did U.S. actually blow up its chance of talking because they had actually given 2 weeks to consider the talks?
Well, they gave 2 weeks, but obviously they started after about 3 days or so. So those 2 weeks were not capped. The Israelis were alarmed by the 2 weeks. They said they are about to try on their own. They say 2 weeks, and indeed, I think the 2 weeks was never seriously thought. It was Trump saying, "I don't want to have too much pressure on me. Let's have a little time for me. I'm taking 2 weeks." 2 weeks is a long, long time when we have already escalation of 9 days of war, intensive war. The Israelis were spreading that they're going to do things on their own. 2 weeks allow very, very slow effort towards what happened in Europe at the level of the foreign minister, European, and the Iranians did not go much. I'm also very much concerned that Iran would possibly even very, very soon leave or depart from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, being attacked. The claim that it was a violation of the UN Charter, the Non-Proliferation Treaty itself. So we are moving to very, and we need a third party to try at least to hold things and to try to create some basis to start negotiations. We don't have any negotiation, and I think both sides want negotiation. The problem is that the Iranians are even more humiliated, more damaged, and it's difficult for them to agree. I think Trump and even Israel would love to have some kind of effort to reach a deal that certain achievements that were already achieved about the Iranian program, dismantling it, will remain. Iranian, it's difficult to accept that, and so we'll see.
Right. And talking about Israel, they didn't really look like they actually wanted to come on the table because they were really anxious on trying to fulfill their goals. That being said, no.
Well, Netanyahu said just after the American attack that he would be willing to have, at this point, after the American attack, to have some kind of talk of ceasefire. But it's a very, very complex, and there is no much skills in the area for achieving that thing. There is no brokers around, and it is a failure of diplomacy.
Absolutely. Now, Trump says that there are many targets left, and but if peace doesn't come quickly, we will go to these other targets with precision. Now, with Iranian retaliation that we see right now, do you expect another U.S. strike?
It very much depends on the Iranian response. As of now, it very much depends whether Iranian response would move into straight American targets in the area or outside the area. If Iran would continue the attack on Israel, I don't think it affects that much the United States calculations. I think there is a general interest to try to scale down what's going on. It also depends what's the level of the damage. It was the U.S. who has the capacity to inflict a great deal of damage, but we do not know. Has the major enrichment facility underground, deep underground in Fordow destroyed, damaged? How badly it was damaged? The Iranian claims it was not seriously damaged, so we don't really know. It was, as you know, it was Fordow as well as two other facilities. One is Isfahan and also Natanz, targets that Israel already had hit a number of times. So my very intuitive rough view is that the Iranian nuclear program has suffered badly, and it's not a matter of, definitely not weeks, and most likely not a matter of months, but possibly more than a year, would be a year or two of just to prepare the damage that was made, maybe even more. And this is just speculative.
Absolutely. On that point, now what Iran said, what they were already anticipating such attack. We have been discussing this all over for days now since the escalation did go up. That will U.S. participate, and it's probably given that Iran was somehow they were anticipating it and they were prepared for it and they got the evacuation is done before the attack. And so that being done, do you think they could have also been prepared for these U.S. strikes and probably retaliation that's going to come?
Possibly. Two things about what you said. What you said is very, very important. We're talking about evacuations of fissile materials, high enriched uranium at the level of 60%. Some of it apparently was in Fordow and was in Isfahan. The Iranian make it clear that it was taken out. We have no idea where it was taken out to. Iraq has a large amount of material. Some people talk about 400 kilograms. People talk about 275 kilograms of 60% enrichment. Depends what kind of capacity Iraq was still left to enrich. We do not know. But if you have some capacity to go further from 60% to 90%, if you have the capacity, it could be a matter of days. That means that Iran could be in a position, if those capacities survive, to move towards some rudimentary nuclear devices within weeks. That's the worst case scenario. So the question is, what happened to the remaining materials, the 60% level, and of course the damage to those enrichment facilities in Natanz, in Fordow, and some smaller one in Isfahan.
All right. Well, Iranians still, they do look adamant. We've seen some critics and experts say that from Iran that the red line has been crossed. And it does not look like they want to do anything with peace talks as of now. And that being said, what options, according to you, do Iranians actually have now, with some experts also saying that they are having a depleting arsenal?
I'm very concerned. I think that it's not clear to me how much capacity Iran, military capacity, missiles, has to respond. I mean, what Iran attacked Israel just in the last half an hour or so, it was about, from what I heard, it was about 25 missiles in 2 waves. In other words, Iran before the war had a capacity to inflict damage of hundreds of missiles in a short time, in about half an hour. So they have much less capacity. They have lost a great deal of launchers. Some people say about half of their launchers were gone. We talk about hundreds, 200s, or even more. So what my concern is that we are moving into ongoing attrition war. Every day or two, some launching of missiles from Iran. Iran has the patience. Iran has been damaged. Israel, of course, has the advantage in terms of its ability to essentially to have a full control over Iranian sky. But in terms of attrition, in terms of effort, it's Israel is a small country, 10 million people. The Israeli IDF and the Israeli Air Force also have limited sources. And the question is, the time factor is playing. And I think both sides have interest to scale down. But given what happened, and given especially the humiliation and the damage to Iran, it's given for them to accept what they view, what they are realizing would be terms of surrender. So how to bring it to an end, it's a very big issue, and that's the challenge for diplomacy, and I do not see it right now. We'll see.
Right. Also, since we are talking about the escalation, Hamas has condemned the U.S. strike. The group said that Trump administration and Israel are fully responsible for the grave repercussions of the aggression. Let's say if this actually does escalate right after U.S. Involvement, what actors do you think can have the potential to be dragged from the region, West Asia region, to this war?
Well, it is a war within a war. I mean, after October 7th, Israel already, almost 2 years, a war with Hamas. There was a war with Hezbollah. Hezbollah, was defeated significantly, but there is still remaining elements that Hezbollah still has. So far, Hezbollah in Lebanon has been cautiously refraining to join. There is pressure on Hezbollah to join with the little remaining that they have. It will be could be further damage to Lebanon. Hamas is, of course, very much defeated, but they have some 50-something Israeli remaining in Gaza, 20, possibly even more of them alive. So those very serious issues were put aside. There are families of those Israelis who are the hostages. I'm sure that their situation is terrible right now. Hamas has no much military power right now to respond in a serious way. And as you may know, there are 4 Israeli divisions already in Gaza. So Israel is involved in a fight under Netanyahu in so many frontiers in Gaza, 4 divisions concerning about Judea and Samaria, concerning about Lebanon, and of course the ongoing war in Iran, nearly 2,000 kilometers away, and the Houthis. That's unbelievable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That you broke down very well how this escalation is not just Israel, Iran, and especially with the U.S. now. It's even U.S. targets are on the line. When we see reactions coming in from U.S. exactly, U.S. I mean, even citizens from the U.S., even local citizens, for example, Los Angeles, they're also worried about this. Our correspondent Susan Tenan just told us that they got alerts on their phones about, in New York. It's crazy how this has all escalated. That being said, on the home front in the U.S., many are criticizing Trump. Some are calling for impeachment. Even local Americans, as we saw, are scared.
Well, that's a very extreme.
Exactly. Do you think Trump will actually go for further strikes, as he has declared in his briefing?
His instinct is not to. His instinct is to leave this, indeed, if the damage was sufficient, as a one single way to essentially terminate or to leave the Iranian nuclear program with a great deal of damage and to leave it. From him is even to leave the 2 smaller proxy, Iran and Israel, to continue to fight on their own, and within short time to find a way to scale it down. But it very much depends what's the Iranian response on the U.S. itself. And as you said, it's not only in the region. It's not only Abu Dhabi and Qatar and Bahrain or Saudi Arabia. It could be elsewhere. It could be Europe, could be global terrorism. As you know, Iran was involved years ago, but it was involved in various acts of terrorism directly and by proxies. So it's a very complex situation. There are many, many players. The supreme leader in Iran, 87 years of age, Khamenei, he already designated 3 possible clergy in case of his own demise. We are moving to regional and possibly global escalation to the extent we don't know. And of course, there is concern of Russia, and the war in Ukraine is going on as well. So a very, very complex world.
And that being said, I know it's somehow we have to see how the retaliation comes and what kind of damage we see on nuclear sites. But do you think at this point of time, when Israel has also said that we now do want to go for diplomacy, Trump has said that, the doors are open, let's come on the table or else we're going to strike you. So is there any possibility that Iranians would actually look forward and think about a potential to come on the table for diplomatic talks? Any possible as a possibility?
I don't know. I'm afraid that right now their instinct is to defy. Iran was attacked. They said that if Iran would attack, they would take certain kind of actions. I do expect, and again, it's my own assessment, I do expect that they would make some announcement on the diplomatic level. Possibly even they would accelerate some kind of legislation in the Iranian parliament to make Iran withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, from the NPT. I think it's likely, even very likely.
All right. Well, we'll have to end it there, Dr. Cohen. Thank you so much for joining us and giving your insight. I do appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Hoping.
And with that, we'll have to close this bulletin right now. But of course, more news and updates will follow on the other side, and we'll be continuing with our coverage of the Israel-Iran war with the U.S. now involved. Please stay tuned. Do stay tuned. You're watching Me on War This Line.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Welcome back. You're watching Beyond World is One with me, Diksha Bisla. Let's start with the headlines. Israel Airport Authority announces closure of airspace following the US strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. The land crossings into Egypt and Jordan remain open. Iranian authorities say there is no danger to residents in the city of Qom following the US attack on nuclear enrichment site in Fordow.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Donald Trump says Iran's key nuclear facilities have been obliterated in US strikes, says the objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment facility. President Donald Trump warns Iran to not respond after US strikes, says any retaliation will be met with force far greater.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
President Trump says there will either be peace or tragedy for Iran. Warns that if Tehran does not make peace, future attacks will be far greater. Hamas condemns the U.S. strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, calling it a dangerous escalation. Now, group says Trump administration and Israel are fully responsible for the grave repercussions of this aggression. Ether plummeted while Bitcoin held steady after President Trump announced U.S. airstrikes on Iran's key nuclear sites. Now, this marks a sharp escalation in tensions, with markets reacting to the geopolitical shock. The United States has joined the war against Iran. President Donald Trump has announced that the U.S. military carried out attacks on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Now let's take a look at the latest developments. President Donald Trump addressed the nation from the White House after the U.S. military struck 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including the crucial underground uranium enrichment facility at Fordow. Now, Trump said that the objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat. While calling the strikes a complete success, Trump claimed that the strikes were totally obliterated.
Bibi Netanyahu, we worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
Earlier in a Truth Social post, President Trump said a full payload of bombs was dropped on Fordow. The announcement came just 2 days after he had apparently opened a 2-week window for diplomacy. Now, Trump said that Natanz and Isfahan nuclear facilities were also targeted. Trump added that all planes are safely on their way back home. Multiple reports claim that B-2 bombers, which carry the so-called bunker buster bombs, were used in the attack. Now, Trump reportedly told Fox News that U.S. dropped 6 bunker buster bombs in the sites on Fordow. It also reported that U.S. used 30 Tomahawk missiles on other Iranian nuclear sites. Talking to Reuters, Trump claimed that the strikes were an amazing success. Iranian media reports confirmed that part of the Fordow facility, as well as the Isfahan and Natanz nuclear sites, were attacked. However, the state broadcaster IRIB claimed that the sites, along with their enriched uranium stockpiles, were evacuated beforehand. Top Iranian officials claim that Fordow did not suffer any major damage due to American strikes. Now, Israel has closed its airspace after the U.S. attack on Iranian facilities. The IDF's Home Front Command has also updated its civilian guidelines, announcing that all schools across the country are being closed. All gatherings have been banned, and only essential businesses are allowed to operate. A White House official said that the U.S. had given Israel a heads up before conducting the strikes. The officials also said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to President Trump after the strikes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked Donald Trump for the U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, calling the attack a historic moment that could lead the Middle East to peace. Now, Netanyahu also claimed that this promise to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities had been fulfilled following the strikes carried out in perfect coordination between the Israel and the United States militaries. And here's what he had to say. Listen in.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
All right, and Israeli Congress members and U.S. lawmakers are criticizing the Trump administration for not seeking congressional approval before U.S. troops engaged in attacks against Iran. Now, in a post on X, Representative Thomas Macy, Republican of Kentucky, called the U.S. bombing Iranian sites unconstitutional. Remember, Macy was a co-sponsor of a resolution trying to block any military action in Iran without Congress authorizing it. Well, Representative Jim Himes, a Democrat from Connecticut on the Intelligence Committee, called it a clear violation of the Constitution and said that only Congress has the power to declare a war. Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California said that Trump struck Iran without any authorization of Congress and we must prevent America from being dragged into this war. Representative Ilhan Omar has said that U.S. strikes mark a dangerous and reckless escalation of an already volatile conflict in West Asia. He also said that military strikes will not bring peace and will only provoke more violence, death, and destruction. Nancy Pelosi demanded answers from the Trump administration for ignoring the Constitution and unilaterally engaging in the military without any congressional authorization. Now, Sarah Jacobs called out U.S. strikes unconstitutional and slammed the government for dragging the U.S. into another endless war. While Democratic Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost of Florida slammed Donald Trump for bombing Iran and then calling for peace. He said Trump's actions will lead to more death. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called Trump's actions clear ground for impeachment. She said that Donald Trump has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare the U.S. for generations. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries said that Donald Trump has failed to bring peace to West Asia and bears total responsibility for any adverse consequences that result from his military action. Torma Torres said that the president attacked a foreign country, putting Americans at risk. Meanwhile, House Speaker Mike Johnson said that military operation in Iran should serve as a reminder to American allies and adversaries that President Trump means what he says. He further stated that a nuclear-armed Iran will not be tolerated. Senator Lindsey Graham called Trump's actions the right decision and added that Iran deserves this. Senate Majority Leader John Thune backed President Trump. He said that the regime in Iran has committed itself to bringing death to America and wiping Israel off the map. He further stated that Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapon must be stopped. Backing the Trump administration, Democratic Congressman John Fetterman of Pennsylvania said that Iran is the world's leading sponsor of terrorism and must be stopped. He called U.S. military attack on Iran the right move by the president. US has joined Israel's war against Iran after it bombed 3 key Iranian nuclear facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Now, West Asia is on the brink of an all-out war as Iran mulls its options to retaliate. Well, what will be the American strikes are going to mean for the region, and what will an Iranian response look like? Well, we spoke to a host of experts to understand what's next, and this is what they had to say. Listen in.
The attacks themselves make little sense in the absence of a broader, more comprehensive strategy to bring the war to an end. If they're just an attack to destroy or damage Iran's nuclear facilities, then there would be little point because Iran can simply rebuild. And then the option would be to attack them again and again and repeat the process again and again as necessary. In the past, Iranian retaliation has looked like attacks on U.S. bases in the Middle East, U.S. forces in the region, and it has involved using proxies such as the Houthis, such as Hezbollah, some of the other groups that take their orders from Tehran. I would expect that Iran's initial reaction would be very strongly negative, that they will try to respond militarily through what means are available, through ballistic missiles, through drone attacks and what proxies they have, and through the state-sponsored terrorism tools that they have at their disposal.
They do still have a number of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. They have a number of terror proxies throughout the Middle East. They can conduct assassinations. They can attack bases with rockets and missiles from the local militia. And so I expect that we will see an escalation from Iran in the coming days. However, all of those capabilities are still a small fragment of what they used to be, and their ability to inflict wide-scale major damage is quite limited at that point. So at this point, they are going to probably attack with everything that they have. I just don't anticipate that we'll see mass casualties on the Israeli or American side at this point. But I do expect to see some attacks on U.S. bases, particularly in Iraq, but perhaps as well other places in the Arabian Gulf. I don't think the Supreme Leader Khamenei is going to make any agreement. He has spent his entire career fighting the West, fighting the United States. For him, any negotiation at this point would be tantamount to both tactical surrender, but also ideological, maybe even blasphemy, because it would be abandoning the entire ideological project that he and his predecessor, the first Ayatollah Khomeini, erected when they set up the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so I think the issue is how the Iranian elite and how the other rank and file within the regime are going to respond. If they sense that they have a leader who's taking them down a path that will only lead to their destruction, I think you will start to see splits in the regime. You'll see discontent emerge publicly, and you'll start seeing the Iranian people themselves perhaps take to the streets.
It's almost certain that Iran will respond and respond strongly, and they've got a lot of capabilities in the region. They can shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which will affect 25% of the world's oil and gas shipments. They can use their proxies or their short-range missiles to attack U.S. bases in Iraq. They can hit U.S. troops in Syria. The Houthis can start firing again. Hezbollah has been diminished, but it is not totally destroyed. There's a lot of things they can do. They can pull out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They can throw out the inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency. And what they most likely will do, even if there is regime change, is they will most likely develop a covert program to build an atomic bomb. They've been set back, but there's no way to get rid of the knowledge that they've developed about how to do this. And so it might take a little longer, might take a couple extra years, but it becomes that much more likely now that Iran will develop its own atomic bombs. They can set the Iranian program back for years, but in doing so, they give Iran greater incentive than ever to go forward with the nuclear program in developing a bomb, which now they weren't doing. I mean, that's why if Trump was honest and competent, then we could have achieved that goal without U.S. sending, attacking. Iran desperately wanted a deal in which it was happy to give up its enriched uranium. It was going to ship out the 60% enriched uranium, the 20% enriched uranium, go down to a very limited amount, and then so that it could use for its nuclear energy program and then some of its research reactors. You know, it was more than willing to do that if Trump was willing to negotiate honestly. But as soon as he says zero enrichment, then that's not going to happen.
The top Iranian leadership is swiftly making preparations for a wide range of outcomes. Now, this comes as US President Donald Trump announced that the country's military carried out attacks on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Reports suggest that Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has instructed his nation's assembly of experts, the clerical body responsible for the appointment of Supreme Leader, to choose his successor. Khamenei has reportedly picked 3 names and provided it to the experts to narrow down to the top pick. Ayatollah Khamenei's son, Mujtaba, also a cleric close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who was rumored to be a front-runner, is reportedly not among the candidates. Iran's former conservative president, Ibrahim Raisi, has also considered a front-runner before he was killed in a helicopter crash in 2024. Well, the process of appointing a new supreme leader usually takes months, with clerics picking and choosing from their own list of names. However, with the nation now at war, the Iranian officials say the Ayatollah wants to ensure a quick, orderly transition and to preserve his legacy. In the Islamic Republic, the supreme leader has enormous powers. He is the commander-in-chief of the Iran Armed Forces, as well as the head of the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive branch. The supreme leader is also the senior-most guardian of the Shiite faith. Now, amid the ongoing war, Iranian officials say that they are fighting on a second front with covert Israeli operatives and collaborators scattered on the ground across Iran's vast terrain, and the fear of infiltration among top Iranian ranks. Well, now reports suggest that Iran's Ministry of Intelligence has announced a series of security protocols telling officials to stop using cell phones or any electronic devices to communicate, issuing directives for the public to report suspicious individuals and vehicle movement. Iranian leadership has swiftly replaced officials killed in Israeli strikes within a week's time, showcasing that Iran has a course of action to counter threats so that its administration is functional in times of war. All right, and moving on, the White House has released pictures of President Trump in the Situation Room. Now, Trump can be seen in the Situation Room with several members of the cabinet monitoring the U.S. strikes on Iran. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Trump's Chief of Staff Susie Wiles were also present in the Situation Room. Take a look. And Brent crude prices have jumped 20% over the past month. Rising tensions between Israel and Iran have added to the worries of a further oil price surge. But the Indian government's chief economic advisor said the rally in oil prices will probably have a limited impact on inflation at the moment. Well, Chief Economic Advisor V. Ananthan Nageswaran has said that high oil price from the ongoing crisis in West Asia are definitely a concern. But he suggested that it's not going to have a major impact. He said that Asia's third largest economy is in a pretty good spot to handle such global risks. Nageswaran added that cooling inflation, plenty of liquidity, and low interest rates will create the right environment for India's economy. Now, for the world's third largest oil importer, the surge in the price of oil is a big risk. India has perennially suffered from higher inflation driven by supply-side constraints. The economics of an oil hike shows cost of almost everything goes up with it. It can stoke inflation and hurt household incomes in a country where private consumption accounts for as much as 60% of the gross domestic product. But Nageswaran has said that India can handle the effects of high crude prices as long as they don't last too long. He said it is too soon to get overly concerned. I think it might have to take more than a quarter or even getting into a couple of quarters before we really have to worry. The chief economic advisor added the underlying price pressures are quite absent and ample rainfall will also aid India's economy. Now, it's been quite a wild week in the global oil market. Crude prices have surged from below $63 at the end of May to above $76 this week. Now, prices have bounced around by about $10, and we've seen volatility hit its highest point since 2022. Now, that is largely driven by the back-and-forth military strikes between Israel and Iran. However, Russia's President Vladimir Putin said there was no urgent need for key producers to aid the oil market at the moment. Putin said that tensions between Iran and Israel have had little impact on oil prices. He added that producers don't need to take any more action to aid the global crude market. With a video conference scheduled for July 6th, the OPEC Plus alliance will continue to monitor market conditions and consider a further production increase in August. Putin notes that many OPEC Plus members, including Gulf states, can increase production if needed. Saudi Arabia is willing to make further supersized production increases to recapture market share as soon as possible. But Putin added that any supply increase will be done in a coordinated manner. Now, some 11 days have passed since President Trump announced a done trade deal with Beijing. However, American businesses still don't know when they can expect to get magnets from China and whether Washington would permit a slew of other exports to restart. Now, while the necessary approvals have begun trickling in, many American companies relying on Chinese minerals are still awaiting Beijing's green light to send them. Businesses say even while China's technology is becoming better, it's still not user-friendly. Well, this goes against Trump's promises that rare earths will flow upfront following the June 11th pact in London. U.S. imports of magnets haven't rebounded yet, and imports from China are still at very weak levels. In May, Chinese magnet exports fell by 76% and shipments to the U.S. slumped by 92% from a year earlier. Some companies wait for magnets and others confront sales restriction in China. However, a wide range of American industries are feeling the pinch of the tense U.S.-China relationship. Many Americans rely on Chinese minerals but are still waiting for Beijing to approve shipments, even though necessary licenses have started trickling in. There are too many unknowns regarding the licensing process for businesses to have a solid feeling of assurance over future supplies, regardless of how quickly export permits speed up. Until the rare earth supply line is reopened to Washington's satisfaction, Trump has indicated that the U.S. is likely to keep in place its own export restrictions. And with that, it's a wrap on this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Beyond World is One. Stay tuned.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. We own India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. We on. World is one.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
We're giving an AI-generated video where we can analyze your credit history, your credit score.
It's all about now content. A lot of it is now digital. A lot of TV content is still being watched.
I think it's been a fantastic journey. We have succeeded in some of our original goals, which was to bring credit accessibility to both companies and individuals.
Key milestones of traction under your leadership.
Getting actually a personal check from Mr. Ratan Tata. We got an opportunity to get listed.
One of the biggest things that has changed in Razorpay over the last 5-6 years I've been is to be a single product, single business company to a multi-product, multi-business company.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Welcome back. You're watching Beyond World is One with me, Diksha Bisla. Let's start with the headlines. Iran's IRGC announces that it employed the Khyber missile in the 20th round of retaliatory strikes on Israel.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
President Trump says there will either be peace or tragedy for Iran, warns that if Tehran does not make peace, future attacks will be far greater. Iran's IRGC announces that it employed the Khyber missile in the 20th round of retaliatory strikes on Israel. Israel's rescue services says at least 16 people were hurt after Iran launched 2 waves of missiles. Sirens rang across the country after the Israeli army reported the incoming missiles. Loud explosions were heard in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Haifa. "290 Indian nationals have returned home safely from Iran on a special flight from Mashhad that landed in New Delhi. At least 1,117 Indian nationals have been evacuated from Iran since the outbreak of the current conflict. India's National Investigation Agency has arrested 2 people for harboring Pakistanis accused of carrying out the Pahalgam terror attack case. Now the 2 men, Parvez Ahmad Jothar from Badkot in Pahalgam and Bashir Ahmad Jothar of Hill Park in Pahalgam, have disclosed the identities of the 3 armed terrorists involved in the attack. And the latest, India's National Investigation Agency has arrested 2 people for harboring Pakistanis accused of carrying out the Pahalgam terror attack. Now, the 2 men, Parvez Ahmad Jothar from Badkot in Pahalgam and Bashir Ahmad Jothar of Hill Park in Pahalgam, have disclosed the identities of the 3 armed terrorists involved in the attack. They've also confirmed that they were Pakistani nationals affiliated to the proscribed terrorist outfit Lashkar-e-Toiba. Now, as per the NIA, Parvez and Bashir had knowingly harbored the 3 terrorists at a seasonal hut at Hill Park before the attack. The 2 men had provided food, shelter and logistical support to the terrorists. At least 26 tourists were killed and 16 others were injured in the attack. Now, further investigations in the case are continuing. And for more on this, our special correspondent Idris Loan joins us on the phone line. Idris, it's an important development. Get us up to speed about everything that we know so far.
Well, absolutely a major breakthrough by the National Investigation Agency. They arrested these 2 men basically from the Pahalgam area, and these 2 men were responsible for providing all the logistics support to the terrorists who carried out the Pahalgam attack. One thing that is very important is that security forces, after the attack, had issued posters of 3 terrorists involved in the Pahalgam attack. 2 of them were said to be the foreign Pakistani nationals, while one of them was said to be local from South Kashmir's Natanz district. But today, with the press release from the National Investigation Agency and what information that has been provided by these 2 men says clearly that all the 3 terrorists were Pakistanis. They were affiliated with Lashkar-e-Toiba, and all of them were Pakistanis. There were no locals, but they were given support by the locals to basically help them to go to the place by Saran where the attack had taken place. Parvez Ahmad Jothar as well as Bashir Ahmad Jothar, both from the Pahalgam area, have not only disclosed the identities of the 3 terrorists, but also said that they provided them with the shelter, food, and also took them from one place to another, which is from main Pahalgam towards Baisaran, where the attack had taken place. So this is a big revelation that has come in today from the National Investigation Agencies, that all the three terrorists were Pakistanis. There was name of Adil Thokar, who's a local Lashkar terrorist from South Kashmir, whose house was also demolished after the attack. Now it seems that all the three terrorists who carried out the attack were basically Pakistani nationals. So big security agencies who have been investigating the whole Pahalgam case. It is a big revelation for them and to people across Jammu and Kashmir. And we were also told at the time of the attack that there were around 15 over-the-ground workers who were constantly in touch with the terrorist group who was present in Pahalgam area at that time. So this was very pre-planned attack, as we all know, that these terrorists had not only recce'd Baisaran area in Pahalgam, they had also gone to a couple of more places like Betab Valley as well as Adu. Those two places were also on the target, but Baisaran, because there was no security, and also Baisaran leads into a deep, dense forest, and it was easier for these terrorists to basically vanish into those forest areas after carrying out the attack. And still, security forces are carrying out operations not only in Jammu and Kashmir, not only in southern part of Kashmir, but also across various districts adjacent to south of Kashmir's Anantnag district. And they've also gone to Kishtwar area in the Jammu division, where search operations to look for those terrorists, three terrorists who carried out the attack. It would be easier for security forces now, since they have the confirmation from these two people who've been arrested and who've given the information that all of them were foreign terrorists. It would be easier for them to nab
Thanks,
the
Idris,
attackers
for
now.
getting us that report. That was our special correspondent, Idris Lone, joining us from Srinagar. And in breaking news just coming in, Yemen's Houthi rebels have broken their agreement with the United States in wake of the series of Iranian nuclear strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities. Now, Yemen's Ansarullah resistance movement has announced the end of their agreement with the United States and warned of an imminent military response. The Iran-backed rebels have also expressed solidarity with Tehran in opposition to the United States and Israel. Now, last May, a ceasefire deal between the United States and the Houthis took hold, ending the attacks in Yemen, as well as the wider US-UK airstrikes on Yemen. And once again, this is the latest that we're getting. The Yemen's Houthis have announced the end of their agreement with the United States, and they have warned of an imminent military response. The Iran-backed rebels also expressed solidarity with Tehran in opposition to the US and Israel. Well, you would remember last May, a ceasefire deal between the United States and the Houthis had taken hold, ending the conflict in Yemen, as well as the wider US-UK airstrikes on Yemen. And we're now being joined live by Mr. Chris Toyle from London. He's the director of CABU, the Council for Arab-British Understanding, where he's the current lead spokesperson. Thank you so much, Mr. Toyle, for joining us on the broadcast.
Good morning.
So we are hearing two versions of what happened at Fordow. Now, Iran claims that there was no major blast and that the uranium has already been moved, whereas Trump, on the other hand, is calling it a spectacular success, with no independent verification that's coming yet. Now, from where you stand, how does this strike, real or exaggerated, change the trajectory of Iran's nuclear program?
Well, we really do have to get proper analysis, and I think the challenge is that you can neither believe the Iranian regime, which obviously has a vested interest in trying to downplay what the US has done, nor a Trump administration and a president who is prone to hyperbole, and that was very much on show in his initial remarks after these strikes. But what we've certainly seen is that the United States, Trump, has been lured into this Israeli aggression on Iran. And it's Netanyahu who is looking very smug, very happy this morning, because by having the United States involved, their superior weaponry, those massive bunker-busting bombs, then of course the combination of Israel and the United States has a much greater chance of dealing lasting damage to the Iranian nuclear program. So this obviously is a game changer. The implications of all of this may take some time to work out. Just how will Iran respond? One possibility is that the leadership tries to downplay the extent of the strikes, the damage the strikes have done, so that it is not lured into trying to attack US targets around the region and therefore leading to a more protracted conflict, which in the end it can't win. It can only damage the United States' interests, but the US in the end obviously has the upper hand militarily. Iran could also try to block the Straits for Hormuz. That would obviously not just alarm the United States, but other powers. Remember that most of Iran's oil goes to China, and it would have an impact on the global economy. This all rather depends on whether the Iranian leadership sees these strikes as something that's existential. It depends as to whether Donald Trump is limiting himself to these strikes if the Iranians do not respond against the US. Or there's so many questions that arise from this that we can only unpick over the next few days and weeks.
Absolutely, Mr. Doyle, and Trump has made it very clear that if Iran hits back, the US will respond with even greater force. This is what he had said. But now Tehran doesn't look phased. Not only has it rejected the US pressure, it's already struck back at Israel. So now what's next? What do you think will happen? Is Iran going to go after the US targets directly, or is it more likely to bide its time and escalate through its proxies? Is that an option?
Well, I think first of all, it will continue the strikes as much as it can against Israel. That will be its primary target. There will be more unity behind that approach, Israel as its regional foe. Taking on the United States will further suck the Americans into this conflict, and that's not really in Iran's favor. Now, it appears, as you've just announced, that Ansar Allah, the Houthis, have terminated their ceasefire agreement with the United States. It remains to be seen what sort of level of activity that it will undergo, that they're capable of taking out against US targets. But remember that all US forces and assets in the region will be on very high alert, that normally such attacks from such groups are more effective when they are surprised, when nobody is expecting it. That obviously is not the case at the moment. But I think also, if one wants to look at an optimistic element of all of this at a time of obviously great alarm, that Donald Trump is still talking about Iran coming to the peace table, to get to talks, to taking his deal. Now, this is the language that is not being used by Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, who doesn't want any deal, I suspect, even now. So there is still a little bit of a gap between Trump and Netanyahu, and the Iranians may seek to exploit that.
Right, and having said that, Mr. Doyle, these strikes have lit a fuse that United States can't put out. With 40,000 American troops in the region, there's growing unease that Washington is perhaps being pulled into the war that serves only Israeli interests. Now, it would cost American lives and taxpayers' dollars. Now, in your view, did Trump make a convincing case for why the U.S. should be involved at all in this address?
His address actually was very short on justification. It didn't say Iran is on the cusp of a nuclear weapons program at all. There was no statement about an imminent risk to the United States. So I think there are going to be some serious questions in Congress amongst his own MAGA supporters about whether this was necessary, not even constitutional. Did he actually act constitutionally? I think he'll get through those. I think that whilst there will be some rumblings, he is still a strong enough president to get away with that, particularly if these strikes are limited to what we have seen this morning. However, if we get into a protracted war, more US forces are committed if Iran takes strikes against US targets through its proxies. If there are sleeper cells that are activated, then I think that Trump gets into a more difficult position domestically to justify what he's done, not least as he was the man who got elected on trying to end all of these wars, these forever wars, that he is the person who's railed against this sort of action.
Absolutely.
I don't think Trump...
Mr. Doyle, you know that while Trump's right-wing allies have largely praised the decision to strike Iran, there's a growing unease among others who fear that it could drag the US into yet another prolonged military engagement, as you've just mentioned, and that could potentially divide his political base as well. Now, what's your assessment? Could this move end up being a double-edged sword for Trump, especially given the political climate we're in right now?
It absolutely could. It could get him into all sorts of trouble. There is more of an exit for Trump than there is for Israel, but you know it's really difficult, and in part it depends on the Iranian response and whether they decide to pursue a more diplomatic pose. Will they continue some sort of talks after a while? Will they limit whatever response that they come out with? I don't believe that it'll be in Trump's interest or in his instincts even to go down the path that Israel has been trying of a regime change conflict. I think that is, a step too far for Trump. It's certainly not what he was talking about in that statement that he made. So who knows? But certainly it's pretty precarious for him. If he also manages to limit any economic consequences, if the oil and gas price doesn't go up too high, that will also work in his favour. Of course, there is another element that we don't know about as yet, that in all of these strikes on the nuclear facilities, is there any contamination? Is there any fallout? Let's hope not. But these are always some of the fears, particularly of Iran's neighbours, who could be affected by it, let alone, of course, the Iranian people.
Absolutely. And the U.S. Arms Control Association, which is a non-partisan group, has condemned U.S. attacks as illegal and says that it only increases the risk of Iran and perhaps other countries seeking nuclear weapons. What's your take on that?
I think this may be the lesson of other powers, that they think that they will have to go down the North Korea line, that if they have nuclear weapons, then there will be far less chance of any power, including the United States, going after a regime change option. And that was the failure, some would see, of the Libyan regime under Muammar Gaddafi, and now the Iranians, because they hadn't managed to get across that threshold. So there is a real danger of a massive proliferation, not just in the Middle East, that other powers will get it. And that will then bring all sorts of concerns about control of these nuclear weapons stocks. What will be, can you manage to avoid a full-blown nuclear conflict? We've already seen this year the dangers of where India itself and Pakistan have faced off and had its own tensions, two nuclear powers. This is not something the world should want to see. We need to be better at actually reducing nuclear weapon stocks, not bringing into a situation or environment where it could expand.
Absolutely. And some analysts have said that the US's strikes on Iran make a return to diplomacy quite unlikely, and especially since Iran was involved in negotiations with Washington when Israel launched its unprovoked war more than a week ago. Now, according to you, is there still room for diplomacy to step in and perhaps pave the way for lasting peace in the region?
I think that the United States is still willing on certain terms, by the sounds of it, to get involved in a deal. Trump, I think, still wants to be seen as a deal maker. He will see this as using strength to get a deal. Strength first and peace later, as Netanyahu likes to talk about. But it depends a little bit there on the Iranians. They certainly won't want to be involved in any public deal making and diplomacy in this sort of situation and under fire with the Americans. Now, it certainly brings into question also what was the point of all the talks with the Europeans this week. Remember that the Iranian foreign minister met with the foreign ministers of Britain, France and Germany, but only a day later we have American strikes on their nuclear facilities. So there will be a lot of questions within the Iranian regime as to, is there any point in going into these talks? Does it actually mean anything? But really, they don't have a lot of choices. There's not a lot of exit strategies for them. And they may decide, depending on who wins this argument, that some form of discreet negotiation, maybe behind the scenes, is worthwhile to preserve the regime.
Right, Mr. Doyle, and we understand that the next 48 hours are very critical. The UN is warning of a catastrophic spiral, the Houthis are threatening consequences, and the whole region is on the edge, and no one seems to be in control of what comes next. Now, what are the signs that we should be watching out for, and how close are we to this boiling over into a full-blown regional war?
Well, I think one needs to watch very carefully how the Iranians respond to this, how many missile strikes on Israel, but do they do anything elsewhere in the region? Certainly, I think the Houthis will launch some sort of strike. Would it be token? Will it be something that is of real consequence? I think it will be also, interesting to see whether any assessment of these strikes comes out that really can give us a closer determination of whether the US has been really successful in taking out these heavily fortified nuclear sites. Now, in some ways, if they have had a successful strike and if those facilities have been put beyond use, then it would also, perhaps count against further strikes, further escalations. Maybe the United States will be able to say that they've done their job. So we need to really get more facts, more clarity about what's going on and what the intentions of all the various parties are. But hopefully we can see some urgent diplomacy to try to contain this, because the last thing the world needs, the region needs, is a massive escalation now.
Absolutely, Mr. Doyle. And that being said, of course, we're going to wait and see how the situation develops before to be reached to a conclusion. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
Sure. Thank you.
Now, Americans have mixed reactions to US President Donald Trump's announcement of the US bombing Iran's nuclear facilities. While some call the situation scary, others say the step was necessary. Now, a resident in Los Angeles has said that Trump is doing what he has to do to make sure that Iran does not threaten the United States ever again.
It has to get done, no matter what. Like, by all means, I want peace no matter what. I don't want no deaths. But if a country is literally chanting death to America, what is that supposed to mean? Are they going to care for us? Are they going to, do you think they could, like, oh, we'll give them a chance. We have nuclear power. We'll give them a chance. No, they're going to go straight to us. They're chanting death to America at the end of the day, and that's not cool whatsoever.
I think it's somewhat of a scary situation, certainly, to get directly involved in this. I can't say I know too much on the matter, but just as a citizen, I'm concerned.
Another resident said that it is scary to get involved into the Israeli-Iran conflict and sounded safety concern. Meanwhile, teenagers Marion and Kathy said that they found about this attack on Iran through social media. They said that they never thought about being in a war, but the situation has changed now.
Just like we just saw it a minute ago.
Yeah, on TikTok.
Yeah, on TikTok.
We were on the bus and I saw a TikTok on my For You page and I was like, oh my God. Because I've been hearing about it when it wasn't official. I'm like, oh no, this is happening. It's like, it's crazy that now in this modern day time, like, I wouldn't think, like, being in Gen Z, I would be in a war, but I guess it's just.
Now, the US military actions in Iran have attracted mixed reactions from political leaders, lawmakers, and civilians. Following the US strikes on Iran, security has been ramped up in New York, with the New York Police Department deploying additional resources to religious, cultural, and diplomatic sites across the city. And with that, it's time for us to take a very short break. But don't go anywhere. More news and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching Beyond World is One.